After his conviction in Virginia last month in an imminent second trial on additional charges, Paul Manafort struck a deal today with Robert Mueller's team, a deal that could have big implications for the Russia probe. The president's former campaign chairman today pleading guilty to 2 federal counts filed in Washington, D.C., and also admitting his guilt on charges that a jury in Virginia last month could not settle on. The broad terms of Manafort's cooperation agreement show that he is now obliged to cooperate with prosecutors in full, which appears to include flipping against the president potentially. As the plea makes clear, Manafort must now cooperate, quote, in any and all matters as to which the government deems the cooperation relevant. In his first statement reacting to today's development, Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani saying, quote, once again, an investigation has concluded with a plea having nothing to do with President Trump or the Trump campaign. The reason? The president did nothing wrong, and Paul Manafort will tell the truth. Minutes later, though, Giuliani revised that statement and removed the language at the end that stated, quote, Paul Manafort will tell the truth. Of course, one way to read that is that it could be an indication that the Trump team is bracing for testimony from Manafort potentially detrimental to the president. Manafort has now become the 5th Trump campaign associate to cooperate with the special counsel after pleading guilty to criminal charges. That list includes former Trump attorney Michael Cohen, who has also been talking to the Mueller team, according to a new report from Vanity Fair out just late today. Joining me now is Tom Winter, investigations reporter for NBC News, Michael Schmidt, Washington correspondent for the New York Times, Barbara McQuade, a former U.S. attorney, and Betsy Woodruff is a political reporter at the Daily Beast. Thank you all for being with us. Tom, let me start with you. So just in terms of laying out the road forward for Manafort, the guilty plea and what sounds like an open-ended cooperation agreement, every question is on the table here. He can't say, I don't want to answer anything.
Right. No, I mean, the agreement is very clear. Federal law enforcement agents can speak to him. Government attorneys can speak to him. They can have him in front of a grand jury. They can have him testify at trial, maybe for somebody else who might be charged down the line. So it's really open-ended. I think the interesting thing here, and it's towards the bottom of the plea agreement that we really get this kind of in writing, so to speak, is that Paul Manafort has already offered, either he or his attorney has already given them a written proffer, which means that Paul Manafort or his attorney has already told the Mueller team, hey, guys, you know, this is kind of the general sense of what I have here. That's typically what those written proffer agreements bring. So, and that was on Tuesday of this week. There's also some indications from the plea agreement that they first started having some discussions on Monday of this week. So this is not going to be a situation here where Mueller is coming into the office on Monday and says, well, what does Paul have?
So when you say proffer, too, do we have a sense what that information might pertain to? He's telling them, hey, I have something that's useful to you potentially in what specific area?
Yeah, so typically the way that these are laid out, they'll lay out at first, hey, these are the general topics. Usually an attorney will do that. This is what Paul Manafort might be able to speak to, these particular topics. At that point, typically, according to federal prosecutors that I've talked to, typically then you would actually bring in the defendant. In this case, you would bring in Paul Manafort and say, okay, we understand you want to talk about this. Tell us a little bit about what happened on that day. You want to kind of test that person's knowledge and see how they're going to talk with you and see if they're going to come forward and provide those details. We don't have that written proffer agreement. That's something that's going to be under lock and key and under Mueller's team. We would love to have it because it'd be great to know what Paul Manafort would be willing to tell them. But that's not something that we're going to see in a public space anytime soon.
Well, we've got the good fortune. We can thank the planning of our producers for this, of having a former federal prosecutor with us, maybe who can answer this and shed some light then on that next step. So, Barbara, you hear Barbara McQuade, excuse me, Tom Winter outlining there this proffer. So from the prosecutor's standpoint, from the Mueller team standpoint, then, they've got this cooperation agreement. What next for them?
Yeah, typically what happens next is they've been proffered sort of the topics. These are the things that Paul Manafort knows about. I would imagine that what would happen next is a series of meetings over the coming days and weeks where they would spend considerable amounts of time with Paul Manafort, going over every one of those topics, really drilling down in detail, showing him documents, confronting him with the testimony of other witnesses to determine the veracity of what he has to say, because not only do they want to know the whole story, they want to make sure that it's all true. And so they will test it against other records, other witness testimony that they had. It will be an exhausting process. The plea agreement even says that some of these may occur with their permission without the presence of the defense attorney. So they may spend lots of hours with Paul Manafort sitting down, combing through documents and really probing the extent of all the things he knows so that they can go forward. And then they may come back to him as they learn other things as the investigation goes on.
Yeah, and in terms of what he may know, what he may be able to shed light on, the usefulness he may be able to provide to the Mueller team in this Russia investigation. Manafort could potentially provide information about any potential conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. That's certainly something we know Mueller's been looking at. He was among those who were the top campaign officials who attended that June 2016 meeting with Russians at Trump Tower. That was arranged on the promise of Kremlin dirt on Hillary Clinton. Shortly after that, Manafort offered private briefings to a Russian oligarch about the progress of the Trump campaign. Manafort may also know about the changes made to the 2016 Republican convention platform, which weakened the language on U.S. assistance to Ukraine, since he was among the earliest to deny that the campaign was responsible.
Everybody on the platform committee had said it came from the Trump campaign. If not you, who?
No, it absolutely did not come from the Trump campaign. I don't know who everybody is, but I guarantee you,
so
there's
nobody from the
Trump
campaign wanted that change in the platform?
No one. Zero.
A Republican delegate, though, later told NPR that the Trump campaign was involved in that platform change. Manafort also offered an unconvincing denial when it came to Trump's potential business relationships with Russian oligarchs, an area Mueller is likely scrutinizing.
So to be clear, Mr. Trump has no financial relationships with any Russian oligarchs.
That's what he said. That's what I said. That's obviously what our position is.
So while he was serving as Trump's campaign chairman, Manafort was also in touch with a business partner who, according to court filings, maintained, quote, ties to a Russian intelligence service throughout 2016. So, Michael, just in terms of the potential areas here, and we don't know yet exactly what Mueller might be looking at here, but there's a broad range of Russia-related topics that the Manafort name comes up in.
Yeah, and the biggest one being the 2016 Trump Tower meeting. And if you're Mueller and you want to someday finish this investigation, you really needed to speak with Manafort. Even if he doesn't have anything that can lead to another prosecution, his testimony and knowing everything that he knew is essential, because you have to turn over all of these rocks to make sure that you've run down every lead. So just by simply cooperating, he helps move Mueller along.
Is there, Barbara, that raises a question, though, what Michael is saying. From the standpoint of Mueller, to agree to a deal like this, and we can talk to Tom for a little bit more in the details here, but my understanding is this doesn't look like a lot of prison time in the future for Paul Manafort. So to agree to this kind of deal, do you have a high degree of likelihood, not only that he's going to sit down and talk to you, but that you are going to get from that actionable items that are going to be very helpful in a potential case you're building?
Yeah, I think so. That's the reason for the proffer. You don't, agree to this until you know that the person has some information that you think you might be interested in. But to Mike's point, I agree with him that we ordinarily think of cooperation as providing what's known as substantial assistance in the investigation and prosecution of other people, a snitch to sort of get somebody else. But you can also get cooperation credit if you provide information that has intelligence value. So if you can provide information about what Russia's game plan was in reaching out to the Trump campaign during the election, that also has value. And so depending on what those things are, no doubt, whatever it is that Manafort and his lawyers have suggested through the proffer, that is something that Robert Mueller has already assessed would have value to him.
And Betsy, we know the president was out there praising, before today's developments, the president was out there praising Paul Manafort for not buckling, for not giving in to Mueller, to federal prosecutors, for not cutting any kind of deal. When his former business partner, Rick Gates, cut that deal earlier this year, turned on Paul Manafort. Manafort made a statement to the effect of, it strongly suggested it was not something he himself found to be an honorable course. In terms of this twist, then, do we know what was it that brought it about from Mueller's standpoint? What did Mueller say to him to bring this about?
We don't know for sure. That conversation, of course, would be extremely closely held. But one thing that we can safely assume could be part of Paul Manafort's calculus here is just the financial strain of going through this kind of protracted federal investigation. Manafort was facing the potential loss of a host of his properties, a host of money he has in bank accounts. So the automatic substantial expenses there, as well as the cost of legal fees, hiring attorneys to represent you through protracted federal trials is really, really expensive. And going as far back as a year ago, people in Manafort's inner circle had been saying this entire process of just being federally prosecuted is extremely financially onerous to him. No one's going to hire Paul Manafort to lobby for them anytime in the immediate future, so it's hard to see how he would get other sort of, financial resources. And it's almost certain that part of his calculation, certainly unlikely all of it, but safe to say a significant part of it was probably just the financial burden of having to pay for lawyers to represent him through a second trial.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.